we're going to have content which is going to be generated, and analytics. Both of these are going to be influenced, or we're going to use AI in both these areas. So to shed light upon this, you actually are supposed to come in before lunch. So first of all, I'd like to thank the speaker from our side. Thank you so much for being so kind towards us. And he's going to come in and share in insights. He's a true maestro in the realms of data engineering, machine learning, and generative AI, has over 20 years of experience, is today with Google, and he's here to shed light about analytics and generative AI and content which can be used by organizations, especially within the edtech sector. Please give us a big round of applause as I call upon Mr. Raghu Vansh Dubey from Google. Let's give him a round of applause.
We are talking about, in the morning I heard that, is generative AI going to take away jobs? Right? I think in the very first discussion which Dr. Chaudhary had. That's one school, that is one thought which often comes to our minds, but that's not the reality. Yes, it is so powerful that it does look like it could change a lot of things. That's how we should perceive this, right? And when we talk about it could change a lot of things, we also want to understand what exactly it can do, right? Can it help me save costs? Can it help me make my products to the market quicker, right? Can it change the entire customer experience or the user experience? In your case, majority of the time, student experience, right? Whenever you're interacting with your students, can it help you change that experience altogether? The answer is yes, it can. But before we even go to the stage as to, we start thinking about how it can make those changes, how it can really change this experience and help you differentiate your offerings. We need to understand at a very high level. We'll not have time to go into all the details of how the generative AI pieces works internally, but then think of it as a technology or a subset of machine learning. It's not something new. Machine learning has existed for decades. What we are talking about is a very specialized domain within machine learning. To be precise, there is AI. Within that, there is a subdomain, machine learning, and then you keep going on inside and inside, just like layers on the onion, right? And eventually you will reach a deeper specialization after natural language processing, and then eventually you will reach what we call universal language models or large language models, right? Essentially, you can also think of it as an evolution of natural language processing, right? So again, something which has existed for decades, right? We have been always used to having some small ways in which we can do OCR, right? Textbooks, we just do a OCR, extract data from there, understand noun, pronoun, verbs, objectives, and so on and so forth, right? That is the place where we started. Right now, what has happened with these large language models coming into the picture is that this capability has increased significantly. When I say significantly, of course, you can handle the natural, the classical natural language task like, classification or extracting data, verbs, nouns, pronouns, name of places, etc., right? Understanding, the grammar and all. But we have gone one level further. With this deep understanding from natural language processing to natural language understanding, we are now in the era of natural language generation, right? These models have become so powerful that they understand the semantic meaning of each and everything which they have been trained on, which means that they can generate net new content, which does not exist before, right? They can engage with you in a human-like conversation, right? They can summarize content for you, just like, you would maybe read a large book and if you want to create a few pages summary, right? They will do that summarization for you. They understand net as to what could be important, what could be those key moments, what could be those highlights, without having to train again and again, which you would eventually end up doing in a typical machine learning setup, right? Now, why is that important? I'm not sure if my slides are working. Probably they are not. If you move a bit further towards this direction, right? Why is it so important? It is important because you as an organization have certain use cases which you would want to solve for, right? Build on top of what you have already built, right? And give that new customer experience or that new user experience. One thing which is very important to call out is that when we look at this particular technology, right, there are multiple components, multiple pieces across the tech stack which need to be stitched. there was a question, is this a hype? Right? Is it just that another concept car which is drawn on the paper but doesn't exist? Or even if it exists, it is in a very, very bad shape or like a visionary shape. Nothing exists right now. Is that a reality? Fair question to ask, right? Because, and you can ask that question because there are reports, public reports, not Google provided, but public reports which say that maybe around 10% of the total people or the total organizations who try to do something with AI end up productionizing it at scale. 60% do the pilot. So you're seeing that funnel. 100 tried it, 60% tried to do the pilot, maybe it did something, only 10% were able to productionize it at scale. Now, that is an obvious question, like, is it so difficult? What's going wrong, right? Should we think slightly different about all of this? And it's important to have this metric in mind because, yes, there is a need to think differently about all of this, right? 10% is a very abysmal rate, right? It's not a good rate. What can we do about it? One thing which is very important to understand is you want to have a good match of the skill set and the implementation cycle. Very, very crucial, right? So for example, if you look at the way we have it structured within the Google Cloud Platform, right? We have tool sets which are geared towards data scientists who are hardcore machine learning enthusiasts. They want to have the lowest level of control which could be possible while they are training the machine learning models, right? They want to build their own large language models from scratch, right? But then there is another set of users who are developers, but they aren't so tech savvy. They don't want that level of control, right? Now, what do you have for them? So there is a different stack altogether within the whole portfolio, right, which unfortunately I'm not able to show as we speak, but maybe I will share these slides offline. That is the place where we have exposed a lot of our products as APIs. There are places where we have exposed things which you can use off the shelf. Of course, you can customize them, tune them with your own data, but then they are available then and there, right, for you to use. And third is you don't want to develop. You want something off the shelf, right? Not even an API. You don't even want to get to that level of detail. That is a place where there are pre-baked offerings which are also available, right? Now, one thing which is important to understand is how are these models able to, do those amazing things which we see, right? For example, some interesting use cases. You can supply these large language models with your own data, and then ask this model, let's say you supply it with a book, and ask this model to create 5 multiple choice questions. It will create it. It will read the data. It will create those questions. If you ask it to not only create the questions, but also give a reasonable answer to those questions, it will do that as well. And that too, it's not coming from its own knowledge base, it's coming from your own data, right? That data could be personal to you, right? It could be your organization's data. The idea is that these models have been trained on internet scale data, and I remember, I don't exactly recall who mentioned this, but it is also important to call out that not only trained on internet scale data, but trained on relevant data. That is quite important, because otherwise, machine learning models will be like garbage in, garbage out, right? There's a lot of engineering which has gone into it to provide it a clean data set, and then it was trained. And now it has developed that capability to understand things in a much more better way, generate things, right? There are, I cannot name as we speak due to referenceability issues, but then there are customers with whom we are working in India itself who are building Q&A platforms for their students, right? These Q&A platforms are helping them code with Java. They are tuning our models with their own code to present their results even better. And at the same time, we also have various other use cases where people are creating Q&A bots purely entirely on the textual data, not code-based data, but entirely on the textual data. It could be textbooks, it could be various types of lectures, and so on and so forth, right? The idea is that if you had to do something like this on unstructured data just one and a half year back, it would have been a heavily custom exercise. Right now, that is not needed. You can just pass on your own enterprise data to these large language models and start working, right? Another important aspect which I would like to mention out here is if you look at some of these technologies, the way they end up working, right? You want to ensure that whatever your data is being used while training the model or while you're using the model is something which remains with you. I was having a very nice conversation with a gentleman during the lunchtime, and he mentioned that we are using Bard, right? And there was a comparison which also more often than not draws up with ChatGPT as well. Very important thing to understand is there are two pieces. There are two types of kind of mindsets which we are dealing here. One is a consumer mindset, right? When I say consumer, it is just all of us. We just want something to go ahead and ask questions to. Maybe I want to ask a question that, hey, build my itinerary because I'm visiting this XYZ place, right? Or I may just ask a question related to some technology or some subject which I'm reading, right? And ask it random things. However, I'm not supplying it my own data, right? These large language models, when you supply it with your data, that becomes your differentiative moat. And it's very important to understand, right? Large language models, for example, in Google, we have majority of our platform based on Google Palm, which is a very large model. It's a 540 billion parameter model. But then that model, when combined with your data, that becomes your differentiator. How you are combining your data with this model, and there's a specific concept called RAG, which I'll come to a bit later. But then that's the whole idea. That's how you develop your differentiation. Your use case, your data, combined with the power of large language models. That's very important to call out. Going back to what I was saying, Bard, right? That conversation, right? How many of you have used Bard, by the way? Just a quick raise of hand. Not many. If not, please just go Google Bard, try to use it, right? And play around it. You'll find it very useful. However, if you're building an application which needs to meet a particular SLA, it needs to be on for a certain number of time. It can't go down, right? You need to build in your own data inside that application, right? Your own knowledge base, your own private knowledge, enterprise knowledge base. It could be books, it could be websites, it could be databases, etc., right? And you really want a full-fledged support ecosystem around it. That's the place where the enterprise offerings come into the picture, which is not Bard. That's Vertex AI and Duet AI. Very important to differentiate here, so hence I'm just calling it out. So if you look at Vertex AI, just like this whole generative AI and large language models are a specialized type of machine learning models, but they are still machine learning models. Vertex AI is a machine learning platform. It's an end-to-end machine learning platform. There are few components within Vertex AI which actually help you to do generative AI related things, right? So think of it as an overall holistic ecosystem, which includes AI plus generative AI, right? So that's one important thing which I wanted to call out. So if you're a builder, if you want to build applications, enterprise class, that's a place where Google Vertex AI Suite will come into the picture. If you are a user, if you're a business user, for example, how many of you have used Google Docs or Google Sheets? Awesome. So whenever these generative AI capabilities are exposed through our usual interfaces, when I say usual interfaces, I mean Google Workspaces, which includes Google Docs, Google Slides, your Google Sheets, etc. A lot of components in the Google Ads ecosystem. These interfaces we are already aware of, right? These are not new. They haven't come in last 1 year, right? Whenever our generative AI capabilities get exposed through these interfaces, we call it Do It AI. Okay? That's one important thing. You don't need to develop anything. You can just go to a Google Doc, right-click, summarize your content, whatever is written, generate meeting minutes, send off emails. If you go to Google Sheet, perform calculations, generate charts. If you go to Google Slides, just go ahead, type a prompt, and it will generate an image, right? But these are all Do It AI capabilities, purely and entirely based, or purely and entirely available for direct usage. When you're building an application, that's a place where you start using the Vertex AI portfolio. Yes, and yeah, I'm hoping if that glitch gets resolved, I'll share you those slides, but I'll continue in the interest of time. Yeah, this is half of generative AI. So you can close it. That's okay. I'll share those slides. Whatever. I'll just speak impromptu. Anyways, what I was going to show is mostly what I'm gonna talk about as well. If you look at some of the other use cases as well, right, which we keep talking about in EdTech, Kahoot. How many of you have used Kahoot? Right? Pretty good. When I used to do some of these presentations internally within Google itself, we used to generate those Kahoot questions. It did used to take time to generate those MCQs, right? You can use generative AI to generate those Kahoot questions. You can use generative AI, for example, to simplify the level of content. Can you try to explain the content which is being taught in class 9th to someone who is in class 6th? Can you simplify that whole language, right? You can do that. You can ask it to do that. And the idea is, think of it, like earlier what we used to do. We used to, let's say we have to, create a simple, let me just think about it. Yeah, let's say if you have to create a simple machine learning program where we want to kind of identify a cat and a dog. Very common example which we often end up taking, right? You would define in traditional machine learning that a cat has fur, it has 2 ears, it has 4 legs, and so on and so forth, right? You'd program those things. The way things have evolved, that is not required. You would go ahead and tell this large language model that, hey, read these books, see these thousands of images, go figure out what is a cat and dog, and now tell me which is a cat and a dog. Same goes for textual content as well, same goes for video content as well, and so on. So the idea is that the experience change which has happened is there, it is here to stay. At the same time, you also want to ensure that whatever you're building remains with you. That's the place where we talk about embarking on an enterprise strategy, where you build these products, build these machine learning and data-related products on the enterprise technology like Vertex. And of course, nothing completes without talking about open source, right? There's a lot of activity going on in open source. What we have done is that you should be able to use on our platform both Google's models as well as open source models, right? You should be able to use them in a responsible way. If you see, a lot of newsletters which eventually come at times, you might have heard of Google's responsible AI principle, RAI principles, and so on, right? We are pretty strict in terms of how the data is leveraged, what are the models are doing, what kind of content they output. We just try to ensure that they don't try to output anything which is inappropriate, right? Similarly, anything which is hosted as an open source model, right? So let's say if you're trying to use Google Palm, of course, it's available. If you're trying to use any kind of other language models, right, they are also available and they have gone through that RAI. So that's also important to understand that when you're embarking on that journey, trying to use a set of models across Google as well as open source models, we try to ensure that you are kind of at least backed up in terms of the validations which we have done, right? I think that's majority of it. What I was planning to say. There's one more thing which which came to my mind while I was having one of the conversations during the lunch, before the lunch actually, that there's no content available to learn these technologies, right? I think that is not true. The idea is like it is still evolving for sure, but at the same time, there's a lot of content available out there. I had some of those links in my slides. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show it as we speak, but happy to share it with Chinmay, and then he'll forward it as well. We are, by the way, working with Chinmay and team as well on multiple AI and Gen AI use cases too. But yeah, I think I'm running short of time. Happy to answer questions offline. Thank you.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to My Startup TV.